Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are at 8:30, so we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order here. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Brian, and I'm an alcoholic. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. That's 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, PA. The food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock, and the speaker comes on at 8:30, so feel free to show up early and enjoy the refreshments, the coffee we put out. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday, 7 p.m. to 7:30. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others can benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anybody new that's at this meeting for the first time or maybe visiting from out of town that would like to introduce themselves so we can welcome you? Yeah.
I'm
Carly. Welcome. Yeah.
Hi, Renee, definitely not.
Renee. Welcome. Yeah. We get everybody yet? Anybody else? We get everyone? The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and that is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. So we got people here willing to sponsor. Again, if you're new, hang out after the meeting, grab one of those people after the meeting. We'd love to talk with you, get you some phone numbers, get you some meeting lists, stuff like that, get you plugged in here. Are there any announcements from the floor for the good of AA? Anybody have anything going on? Tyler.
Tyler, alcoholic. Pete First is looking for home group members. The meeting meets Monday nights at West Palm Church in Quakertown on Allentown Road. It's a 1-hour speaker meeting like this one, and we're looking for support.
Thank you, Tyler. Anybody else? Anything going on? Yeah.
Cody, alcoholic.
Cody.
My own group's a men's group. There's not too many men's in here. It seems like a women's group, but I just thought I'd show us. We need support. It's Tuesdays, 7 p.m. in Horsham. Hit me up if you want details about it. Format. That's it.
Thanks, Cody. I know also next Saturday, it runs concurrent with this meeting, but there is a Halloween party going on in Percy. It's at, St. Andrews is the church? I forget the church name, but I got a flyer for it. It's going to run, I think it starts at about 7 o'clock, goes till like 11. They're doing like all kinds of stuff, but I got a flyer for it. If you're interested in that, see me after the meeting. Our sister group is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday, 7:30, just up the road at Salem UCC Church. That's 186 East Court Street in Doylestown, PA, and the coffee for that meeting's on at 6:15. So again, feel free to show up early if you want to get involved with service or just hang out. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put their donations in that jar on the back table marked Big Book and CD Donations. All CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group at Doylestown. We post all the speakers from this group here. We also post speakers for a meeting we have Monday nights in the room right next to here. It's a speaker step discussion meeting. Starts at 6 o'clock Mondays in the room right next to here. We also have a Facebook page. We post our speakers that we have on there, upcoming events, workshops, anniversaries. Other groups will post things they have going on, celebrations. So it's a good resource to have to stay tied in with happenings in AA throughout the area, I always say. And with that, I believe we're going to have Renee come up here. She's going to read our Just for Today prayer.
Welcome home. My name's Renee. I'm definitely an alcoholic and a drug addict. And this is just for today. Just for today, prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will become agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. And next, Dave will be up to read the preamble.
Hi guys, how you doing? Welcome home. I'm Dave, I'm an alcoholic. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Fumbling stuff. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. Now Brian's going to come back up.
Hello everybody, my name's Kara and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Welcome home everyone. Tonight I'm going to read the 12 steps of recovery. Number 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Number 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Number 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Number 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Number 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Number 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Number 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and came willing to make amends to them all. Number 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Number 10, continued to take personal inventory when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Number 11, sought through prayer and meditation to prove our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And number 12, having a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we've tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Now Brian will come up to introduce our speaker.
Okay, we do have a 7th tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, we'll see that the basket makes its way around. Again, there's no dues or fees for AA membership, but we do have expenses, and your contributions do help us to cover the cost of food, rent, big books, workshop CDs, so it is appreciated. There's absolutely no smoking on the church property. We have a good working relationship with the church. That's really all they ask. You know, we come in and have our meeting here. They just ask that we keep the premise clean. So just be considerate of that as you're coming and going from the meeting. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now to introduce our speaker for tonight, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, on loan to us from the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Staten Island. Please help me welcome Steve.
Oh, I have water. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Steve, alcoholic. My sobriety date is December 1st, 2003, and my home group is Conscious Contact in Staten Island, New York. We meet Wednesday nights for a beginner step meeting each Wednesday, and then on Sunday morning tomorrow, we're a 3 and 11 step group. I love my home group. I'm a grateful member of my home group. I do service at my home group. And you know, getting up and the opportunity to speak for an hour and everything, I'm going to apologize in advance. I do not work linearly. I may talk about different things at different times. If you can follow with me, then you're just as screwed up as I am, because my brain will just shoot off different things, and I don't know where this is going to go. So I started my day this morning, and I woke up, you know, I usually sit with a guy on Saturday mornings. As anybody, I have a really nice full life, and that full life is about this high, and she's 2.5 years old now, and you know, so my life is full in a lot of different ways. But I got up and I sat down with my sponsee Ronnie this morning, and we read A Vision for You. And our conversation really just, and was talking about gratitude and talking about exactly what now coming up on 90 years has been built for us and built for me. And I know that, and I say this for myself, and I say this without any airs in it, I know that my life today is based on two things: God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. A God's grace that has loved me consistently and constantly, good or bad or indifferent. His love has never wavered, has never changed, no matter what it's looked like before I got sober and when I got sober. He has consistently been there for me, with me, and through me in so many ways. The life that I have today is only possible because of God's grace and because of what men and women did almost 90 years ago now, tirelessly. And we're sitting there reading A Vision for You, and we're talking, and we're saying, it was like, man, do I think I would have been able to do what these people did? Like the tireless energy and invitation into homes and the way this organically started, and between a conversation between two men who synonymously at the same time, roughly not across the country, but we're doing the same thing and getting results, and Bill getting sober and Bob struggling and this and that, and all of a sudden, God connected dots, and our conversation was about those dots being connected. And so grateful that the life that I have today and the life that we all have today started from a conversation where two men met, one armed with facts about himself, and thank God because of that, doctor was telling him, Bill, lay off that spiritual stuff, talk to him like an alcoholic, and Bob's out there, and he's inundated with the God stuff, but he talks to another one of us, and the spark happened. And to think that now for 90 years, to stand on the shoulders of people who have actually made that happen. And I know that the life I have today, I am a father today, I am a husband today, I am a son today, I am a brother today, I am a nurse today. Any of the roles of which I have today is only possible because of, in a couple of weeks, month or 2 months, and I believe I will be, I know I will be actually, because I firmly believe in the foundation that's been laid for me. I'm going to be legally sober. For 21 years, up to almost the 21 years, I've consistently done something in my life. One, I stopped drinking, and I put the drink down. But I thank God for the men and women in my life who have shown me that it is so much more than me just putting down a bottle. They've shown me that there's so much more going on inside of me, that I suffer from a disease of alcoholism, that I suffer from the reasons and why I picked up that bottle, why that was a solution, why I needed that, why that was the thing that filled me up no matter what else I had in my life. So to go right into it, in hopeful linear fashion, because it's not going to happen. My first drink consisted of a piss-warm beer ball and a pack of smokes down the woods. Me and my friend Danny, my childhood friend who I'm still close with, go down the woods and we find a beer ball tucked in the leaves, and we found a pack of cool cigarettes. We started drinking this beer ball. We don't know how long it was sitting there. We started smoking the cigarettes, and all of a sudden, Kevin, Donnie, and Chris came down the woods. And I can remember those names because those were the cool kids in the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, there was something like I was with Kevin, Donnie, and Chris. I was the fat kid in the neighborhood. I was always getting made fun of. I was picking fights. I was, always seeking attention. But for something occurred that day, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't pull Danny aside at 12 years old and say, Dan, I'm really feeling a little restless, irritable, and discontent right now. And this beer ball is really helping that. I didn't have that going on, but there was a connection that happened without my permission, that alcohol produced some sort of effect at that very moment. And that's the effect I chased for my entire life. Alcohol did for me what my mother couldn't, my father couldn't, any school couldn't, any girlfriend couldn't, any job couldn't. It produced an effect inside of me that none of that could. The good, the bad, or anything. Alcohol did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And the strange thing is, and I'll get into this, I didn't believe I was an alcoholic when I came to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll get into my story more and more, but I came into Alcoholics Anonymous labeled schizoaffective, bipolar, manic, a whole bunch of different things. I was heavily medicated. I was told by doctors, you're this, you're that, because I was actually showing up that way. And they legitimately had the reason and the right to prescribe the way they did, to think the way they did. And later on in years, I haven't taken, the host of medications I've taken in, 18 years, 19 years, to find out that what I really had was most likely alcohol-induced psychosis in a lot of different ways. But I hung on to the idea of crazy. I hung on to the idea of, well, I'm not an alcoholic because I'm not a Bowery bum. There's not a 50-gallon drum with fire spewing out of it. I don't have a brown trench coat. I don't have cut-off gloves. And I'm not sitting there with a brown paper bag. And since I'm not that, I can't be this thing as an alcoholic. Because when I came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous through a priest, I came to that meeting and I came with that idea and that lens of that's what I needed to be in order to be in this place. And I only went to a couple of meetings. And I'm so grateful for sponsorship and for our literature to explain the disease of alcoholism as AA talks about it. Not as you see it, not as I see it, not even as my sponsor sees it, but as Alcoholics Anonymous and the men and women who made the foundation of this program of recovery. And I'm so grateful that I was open enough to listen after going back out. So I don't even say I consider it a relapse. I didn't even know what a relapse was because I didn't believe that I was this thing. So now we're going to jump back and I'm going to screw you all up because I'm not going linear as I promised you. So, that beer ball and then all that stuff leading up to that moment when I took my last drink, which was after coming to Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time, I knew I drank different than other people. I knew I reacted different than other people. My friends were able to get home. My friends were able to be sane. I was the question mark of the friends group. I was the guy who was wondering if Steve's going to hurt himself. Never really hurt somebody else. I'm not a guy, I'm not a violent person. I've maybe hit 2 people in my life out of anger. I was the guy that I'd be sober or drunk and I put cigarettes out on my arm. I was the guy who was hurting myself in so many different ways, not only just drinking, suicidal, suicide attempts, this and that, but I wasn't that violent guy. I wasn't that guy going out and causing fights or anything. There was a deep sense of self-loathing that, we have these, nothing's original in Alcoholics Anonymous, really isn't. Like, if someone's saying something profound, they probably stole it from like some 16th century monk or some ideas, because those are the things that I've always connected to. Like, people, we share things, we talk about different things, we say different slogans and all this stuff, but they connect to this thing inside of me that I've always felt separate, I've always felt apart from. And these are the things that, we come into the rooms, and those are the things I started identifying with, because that I've had my whole entire life. Chris, Donnie, and Kevin, and the beer ball and the pack of smokes, that kind of started that little thing of being like, okay, I feel all right now. I feel like there's something going on inside of me that I couldn't produce on my own. There's something going on inside of me that I was able to not produce because of the love of family, friends, or anything like that. I didn't have that. I didn't have that growing up. I always felt less than. I always felt apart from. And it continued on, and my friends were able to be the guys going home. I'd be the one, leaving my friends. I would go down to a place that I would drink on by myself called the Highland Pub. I'd park my car in a strategic way because the pub was right down the block from my house. And if I just got to the car, able to go this way, and then get home, I'd get home. But then my car would magically find its way to the beach, and I'd be all alone on a beach. And that's the kind of way I drank. My friends were able to kind of put the light switch off. I was never that guy. I never wanted to be that guy. Like, it didn't make sense to just be, like, put it off. And when it was off, I was so uncomfortable at the idea of being me, of living in my own skin, and I didn't know this at the time. I thought I was crazy. I thought, that the way things were coming out, the way I was showing up, the psychological stuff I was going through was purely based on me being crazy. I go away to college. I went to Oneonta, and I stayed there for honestly 4 or 5 weeks until I called mommy and daddy and told them I'm not doing anything, I'm wasting your money, this and that, I'm eating onions the size of softballs because I'm trying to pledge a fraternity. We got nights called gin and tonics and hydroponics, Bloody Marys and blunts. That's what I'm doing with your money. I'm pledging a fraternity. And that's when I fell in love with Tanqueray. And me and Tanqueray started a love affair. I loved gin. Gin was the thing. Now, I have done all non-conference approved stuff. I've always went to an empty well of any type of substance, but I know that I'm an alcoholic, tried and true. I was able to put those other things aside. But I had my days where all of a sudden, I've got 5, you've got 5, we're driving around, we're doing this, we're doing that. There's always was something. There was always something going on in my life, but alcohol was the thing. Tanqueray did for me what life couldn't, what love couldn't, produced an effect inside of me from, was that my 4-week stint in Oneonta, but that's when I started that love affair. I come home, I get a little job at a gas station, I'm actually learning how to steal from the gas station. I end up, before, like, we had certain things that, like, you even had credit cards. You had to give me your credit card. You had to do certain things, and I'm, like, getting cash, and if you're going for your gas is $25.70. I'm charging you $27.70. I'm pocketing $2. I'm doing that like the whole day. My friends and I are buying like a bag of stuff, and then we're sitting under my car pretending we're mechanics. Meanwhile, there's a bong under the car, and I'm just getting dishonest. I'm feeding things along. The gas station's also getting robbed at that time. So me and my friend Danny, we go out one night. We go to a place called the Waterside. We go to another dingy place called Sharky's. I'm not even going to go into what Sharky's was, but it was dingy. He knows Sharky's. And so all of a sudden we run out of money. We had to be at work the next day. And I end up saying to Danny, I was like, you know what we can do is we can go rob the gas station. We can go in, we have the stuff, we'll be able to go get the money that we have to show up with in the night and in the morning and everything, what's left behind, and then we just show up for work, and then it can't be us because someone had robbed the gas station. So that particular night, we go, we do this, we end up showing up for work. Now, did I know certain things were going on? Did I know progression? Did I know the idea of compromising myself for certain things for a drink? No, I didn't. I just thought it was a good time. I thought it was a logical idea to do. I didn't realize about progression. I didn't realize about phenomena of craving. I didn't know that kind of stuff was going on. It was just a good time. It was a great idea. We'll cover ourselves up. One of the best amends I've ever made is because of that to a gentleman, and hopefully I'll get to that if I don't jump all over the place yet again. I didn't know that stuff was going on at that time because there is this other stuff that's going on. Some childhood stuff came up. Had some really severe trauma coming up. Had some paranoia coming up. Had some, real doubt in relationships coming up. That drove me from my first suicide attempt where I put on a comfortable pair of pants and swallowed a whole bunch of pills and prayed I didn't wake up in the morning. And when I woke up in the morning, I felt like a failure. Got honest with my friend Danny. I remember my friend Danny picking me up because my girlfriend had called at the time. And he says, come on, come down to meet me on we drove dump trucks. And I go down and I go see Danny and we're talking and everything. And he told me, he knows what happened last night. And he says, you know what, Steve, that would have been great. You would have solved all your problems, and you would have left me and all your friends and your loved ones wondering why. And I'm so glad he approached that situation in the way he did, because he showed me that, that was not going to be the answer. Now, I'd like to say that I didn't think about doing that ever again, but that's not necessarily the truth. But it was one of those moments that kind of did wake me up a little bit. Didn't wake me up enough to stop, but it woke me up enough to try to seek if I needed help. So I started seeking out therapists. I started seeking out this because I'm thinking I'm crazy, legitimately showing up on paper that way. I'm the guy, I used to work for AT&T down in Cranberry, New Jersey, and it was all the way down off the turnpike. Now, my grandiosity runs deep. I'm sure the only one whose grandiosity runs deep in this room. So I go find the therapist. And I found this therapist who was a hypnotherapist who got struck by lightning. And I was like, if there's anybody that's going to help me, it's a therapist who got struck by lightning. He's got to know something. So I drive from Cranberry, New Jersey, at I think it was 7A or 8 or down on the turnpike, to exit 172 on the Garden State Parkway right into the border of New York. Because if I'm going to find a therapist, I might as well go to this guy because he's definitely going to be the guy. Like, I've never had a problem seeking or even growing up, like, I grew up Catholic. I'm not a recovering Catholic. I might be recovering from Sister Jean Marie in the 2nd grade, but I'm not a recovering Catholic. I had beautiful experiences in the church. I had beautiful experiences in high school. I went to a pre-seminary high school in Cathedral Preparatory Seminary up on the Upper West Side. I lived for a year in a multi-million-dollar brownstone with 5 of the priests, Father LaSala, Father Ed, and Father Bob. Served Mass with Cardinal O'Connor, learned Latin. I don't know any of Latin anymore, nothing of it. I also that year stole Jameson's Irish whiskey from Father LaSala. I also found one of the first diseases that I had was in that particular year, I discovered bulimia. And later in life, I realized that that is another part and parcel thing of my alcoholism. I've always had that poor relationship with food. My first 12-step meeting was Overeaters Anonymous when I was like 12 or 13 years old. I went to a fat farm when I was a kid, Camp Go Lang up on Lackawaxen in Pennsylvania. There was always something going on inside of me. And in that year, I discovered bulimia. And Father LaSala found me out, called my parents and everything, talked about it. But that's something that's always been part of my story because I sought booze in food. I sought that in food. I sought that stone cold sober in so many different things. So grateful for the men in my life who have been my sponsors, who have challenged me and said, Stephen, where else are you drinking in your life without drinking alcohol? However long I've been sober, where am I still going to those empty wells? Where am I seeking God in something other than God? And I have done that numerous times, stone cold sober, behind the walls of the steps, behind the walls of sponsorship, because of that thing inside of me that I know that I have wholeheartedly. But again, I didn't believe I had that thing when I came here. I was crazy. Until my mother passes away September 3rd, 2002 from malignant melanoma. She dies on hospice at home. She was also one of us, I believe. I found my mother's big book years later, and my mother had gone to a detox. I remember it, still can remember it kind of vividly. My mom was a very well, beautiful, put-together woman. She wore high heels for everything. Like, if her sandals needed to be, they would be heels. She always had nice hair. She would dry her hair with one of those balloon things with the little hose going into it. And one night, I think it was like 7th grade, pretty sure it was 7th grade. I'm sleeping on the couch, because I used to sleep on the couch. And my mother's there drying her hair, and I don't realize what's going on with Mom, but she's swaying back and forth. She's swaying back and forth. And all of a sudden, she blindly falls off the chair, cracks her head on the molding of the corner, and starts bleeding. And then the next thing you know, my mom's not home. I find out later she went to a place called Doctor's Hospital to go to a detox. And my mom went to a couple of meetings, but I think there might have been misunderstanding and friction between her and my father of what that really looked like, and maybe some fear on my dad's part, maybe some stuff going on in the marriage I didn't know about. But years later, I found my mother's 3rd edition big book, and the only thing dog-eared was how it works. And I remember in a rough time of my recovery, I took that book and I started doing a 4th step with that book. So where am I now? My mom is. So in 2002, that happens. A couple of months later, I go up to City Island to go see Father Bob. And Father Bob was my parish priest in St. Clair's, where I grew up, and Father Bob was also one of the priests at Cathedral Preparatory Seminary where I went. And I didn't know this, but Father Bob was also one of us at that time. And I think I knew about it because it might have been spoken about in the church without being spoken about in the church, but I'm young and I'm not framing that out. So I go up and I go visit Father Bob on City Island, and he says to me, after a lengthy conversation, after sitting up there and talking to him, he says, Stephen, I think you're an alcoholic. And at that moment, I'm diagnosed this, I'm diagnosed that, I'm put on antipsychotic medication, I'm put on antidepressant medication, and I was just open enough to listen to the idea. And it was like one of those Velcro balls that you threw at the wall and it stuck. And what happened at that moment was he made a phone call. And the responsibility statement that we all have, the hand of AA showed up. He called another gentleman named Monsignor Jeff. And Monsignor Jeff proceeded to pick me up at 12:30 in the afternoon and took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous at 1 o'clock, and I'm pretty certain it was a 1 o'clock meeting. I know it was on Thursday in the afternoon. And I went to that meeting, and I've only went to 2 meetings after that, because I came into the rooms of AA with the idea, Bowery bum, cut-off gloves, 50-gallon drum with fire spewing out of it, brown paper bag, and if I'm not that thing, I can't be that. I can't be what you need me to be. I can't be that. I can't be an alcoholic. I'm not a Bowery bum. I'm not that image that my brain was telling me I needed to be. So a year goes by, roughly. That was, I think it was like October. Yeah, it was probably October, November. So a year goes by, I'm marinating a little bit more, I'm drinking and doing whatever else I'm doing, and pretty much it's all gin at that time. And I go out, now there's a couple of pretty dramatic things that went on, in that year. I wake up one morning by a deli that I used to go to, and I ended up waking up, my jaw split open, blood all over the place, having no recollection what had happened. My friends pieced together what had happened, that we were at my friend Nick's house on Sunday dinner, and Nick's uncles Vito and Vinny, of course from Staten Island, Vito and Vinny, and they're talking about how much money fits in a suitcase. Now, Vito and Vinny, I know them, they have no idea what they're talking about of how much money fits in a suitcase. Then from there we proceeded to go to a place called Danny Boy's. I proceeded to push somebody in the bar. Then we proceeded to go to a strip club. Now, I'm not the guy going into a strip club doing this. I'm the guy, the pathetic guy in a strip club being like, "You're so pretty. Why are you doing this? You have so much to offer." That's like, I'm pathetic. Like, I'm thinking I'm finding a wife or I'm finding something at a strip club. I'm not the guy. Like, I'm just not built that way. So then, and I don't recall any of this, but the way that I ended up with the blood and a fracture in my jaw and blood dripping all over the place is because this is how it was ending. I'm outside of this strip club getting my face handed to me. And my friend Nick told me later on that, "Stephen, you're a big guy. You could probably handle yourself." And again, I'm not a violent guy. Hit 2 people in my life out of anger or anything like that. He said, "You were kneeling on the pavement of the strip club with your arms wide open like this, getting beaten by someone and saying, 'You can't hurt me.'" That's the best I had. So that's around May. I end up now, it's coming into November. My father goes away, and now my mom has passed away just over a year. I'm a 27-year-old man-child. Now I'm a 48-year-old man-child. And so I'm in the house. My father's on the other side of the Atlantic in London and Ireland at the time. I'm home by myself, and I'm drinking. I'm doing what I normally do. I had this tear from like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I was at a wedding for a friend, and that whole week in there was a real absolute blur of what was going on. But I do know that I woke up on Saturday morning after Eddie's wedding, a complete wreck, shaking, seeing things, hearing things, laying in my father's bed. I couldn't get out of bed the whole day. I probably should have drank. It would have made me feel better, but I couldn't. Like, it was just scary. I was literally in the mix of the diagnoses they were giving me and everything, understandably so. And then, so Saturday passes, Sunday I wake up. Like so many times before, because there's been those times where all of a sudden I wake up and the quarter panel of my Jeep Wrangler is missing. And I'm wondering if I hit something, someone, what's going on, looking at the newspaper, those consequences that have caused me to kind of be like, okay, I need to slow down, I need to do this, you need to get stuff in order. Doctor giving me another medication, this and that. Meanwhile, actually, jumping back into something, there was a doctor I went to at 450 Seaview, and her name was Dr. Manny, and she was a social worker, and then I'd see the psychiatrist, and she was prescribing me, and she said, Stephen, I don't know if I could fairly prescribe you medication because of how much you're talking about drinking. I want you to get blood work done. And I didn't even connect the dots still then that some professional is telling me these things about myself. So now that, I wake up on that Sunday morning, November 30th, 2003, with a desire to change, a desire to be better, a desire to live better, a desire to do better, a desire not to drink, and I can do this and I want to do this, and not just the horror and remorse of the couple of days there, but all the other stuff flooding back in. So I wake up with that desire. I go looking into a judo class because I used to wrestle in high school, and I was like, all right, so you push, I pull, and that kind of grandiose idea, I'm not going to hit anybody. That's how my brain works. And then I go Christmas shopping. I go looking into Christmas gifts, this and that. But then all of a sudden what happens is a thought, not made by me, not produced by me, just happens. Stephen, you know what would make today better? A bottle of Tanqueray 10. And just like that, I didn't make that thought happen. It just happened on its own. And I ran with that thought, and I went down to a place called Carmen's that I used to go to. And I sat down there, and I had my gin and tonics and this and that, and I'm drinking excessively. And the next thing you know, I get a phone call from my friend Nick, who starts sharing something with me. And again, I am not mentally stable for a multitude of reasons. Paranoia, distrust, a lot of really scary things going on in my brain. I get this call from Nick, and all of a sudden my brain just snaps with some of the stuff he was telling me. He was just in Pennsylvania, people up there, and I started making stuff up, and I started going really down this crazy rabbit hole. I go back into Carmen's, I continue to drink my gin and tonics, and I come home. Again, my father's not away, and it was like an after-school special that was on Channel 4. My father's, not home, he's away, the radio's playing in the background. I'm pretty certain, to say this, that I walked in and it was Fade to Black by Metallica that was actually on. Now, the state I was in and playing Fade to Black, that's, anyone knows Fade to Black, it's a pretty rough song. So I go into the house, and I proceed to go look for a scalpel. I was a biology major at the time, too. I was also trying to get on the FDNY. So I go in, I start looking for this scalpel because my father's not home. And that's it. I'm going the long way. I'm not going across, I'm going long. And there again, not thinking of anything else but myself. The pain that I put myself in, the pain that I feel, the pain, not any pain of anybody else or anything like that. And I can't find that scalpel. And in the meantime, what happens is I get a phone call from a girlfriend of mine, and I ended up picking up the phone. And my friend Nicole starts like rambling and yelling and this and that, needing money, this and that. And for some reason, I start telling her what I'm doing. And in the meantime, in between that, what I had done is I took a knife and I put it on the stove and I heated it up until it was orange. And in some symbolic way, I attempted to burn my heart out of my chest. So Nicole hangs up that phone on me. And I'm laying on the floor of my home while my father's away again. And I'm laying on the floor, chest down, on the rug, and I hear a knock. And it was the ambulance, because my friend Nicole had called suicide attempt to the house. And this is the best I had, now going on almost 20 years ago, because I was trying to be a firefighter. And I took that EMT class. And they said, what you have to say is, I deny medical attention. That's the best I had. That's the best I had for showing up to life and any of the things. The best I had at that moment, and the pain and the misery and everything that I was feeling and everything I was going through, putting others through, was I deny medical attention. And then I heard another knock. And I heard, Steve, it's me. And it was my best friend growing up, Frankie Staplefeld, who's not an AA, so I guess I could say his last name, who lived at 115 Elmwood Avenue. And he was on the other side of Staten Island on Bard Avenue, and he was an FDNY EMT. And he heard over his phone, suicide attempt at 86 Elmwood Avenue. And from there, I got up, and I opened up the door, and I was taken to Staten Island University North. And from there, I was, sort of psychiatrist. And actually, there was a psychiatrist that I refused because I didn't like the way she looked, and I refused. I said, I'm not talking to you. There's no way I'm not talking. I remember like this Vivitrol going on in my head, just because the woman's appearance and everything. I'm like, I'm in an emergency room. I got a burn on my chest, and I'm telling you, you can't help me. From there, I ended up being taken down to Staten Island University South, and I spent 10 days in the psych ward there. And I'm jumping back now. Sorry. So that first suicide attempt, this is not a compliment you want to hear from your mom, right? So my first suicide attempt, I end up going to St. Vincent's. And my mother comes and visits me. Meanwhile, she had just seen me shot up with Haldol because I'm like slamming my head up against the wall because they're trying to challenge me about why I was doing the things. And my mother says to me, while I'm in St. Vincent's, and there was a guy who still believed he was a Vietnam helicopter pilot. There was another guy next to me who still believed he was part of Neil Young, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and I'd be playing along with this guy. And my mother says this to me. Stephen, you're so good with these people. And I'm like, oh, gee, Ma, that doesn't sound like a really great compliment to give your son in a psych ward. So now, I'm sorry, jumping now to my second psych ward. So now I go down to this psych ward, and I'm there for 10 days. There's a big snowstorm in 2003, and from there, I'm still not alcoholic, I'm crazy, give me the Geodon, give me the Abilify, give me this, give me that. And I go from there to 450 Seaview, and I go to a partial hospital program. My father is now home. He's now visiting me in the psych ward after coming home from his trip. And I go there from 9 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. Dad's dropping me off, and Dad's picking me up, and I'm there for about 4 or 5 weeks. And at the end of it, a gentleman says to me, he goes, Stephen, I really think you should have been in the MICA program, the mentally ill, chemically addicted. And it was kind of like when Father Bob, said that word to me, and it stuck. So I took that man's suggestion. And from there, I went to a place called Bridge Back to Life. And at Bridge Back to Life, I met a guy that was one of my first running dogs in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was now on disability. I was working at AT&T. I took a leave of absence and everything for, it was like 6 or 7 months that I was out. And I started going to Bridge Back to Life, and me and my friend Tommy, had experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, so we went down to my first home group, which was Decker Avenue. And so I went to Decker Avenue, and from there I met a man who was armed with facts about himself. And from there I started learning about alcoholism as Alcoholics Anonymous talks about alcoholism. Not even how Tommy talks about it, but going through that literature, starting with a prayer and setting things aside of what I think, my experience, all of that, giving that first kind of prayer and opening myself up to hearing something different. And I started at that moment just like I do today, line by line, page by page, sitting with someone, reading the book with them, not at them. Allowing that person as myself, and my sponsor always telling me at the beginning, he's like, Stephen, I've had an experience. This is about you having your experience. Let's see what that looks like. And turning statements into questions. And one of the first things I identified with right off the bat, just like I mentioned, I didn't have that vernacular, I didn't have that vocabulary when me and Danny were sitting down there with Kevin, Chris, and Donnie drinking that beer ball. But that line that came up in the doctor's opinion, and it said and crossed out, did Steve drink essentially because he liked the effect produced by alcohol, ? And my answer in my book is duh. Of course I did. That's the only reason I drank, for the effect produced by alcohol. And that started this idea of identifying. I identified with Bill's story, how he thought, how he felt, how he drank. I had that identification. But I remember that line being, and I could still look at it today and be like, that was the one. That was the one that kind of piqued my interest, because that's the reason why I drank. That was the compulsion inside of me. I didn't realize later on about that mental twist, how no matter cost, consequence, situation, or circumstance, I have a brain that is going to take me to a drink. It's not going to take me away from a drink. A quarter panel of the car, oh, that was a really bad night, okay, not bad. Oh, the doctor this, the doctor that. It's blotted out. It's blotted out, and the next thing you know, I think I can do it differently. I think I can drink differently. I think I can control it differently. I think I've been making too much about this thing. Started identifying those things in my history that where that was showing up by asking those questions of myself and sitting down with another man and sharing his experience with it. And going through that process. And I also remember at that time, because I was still on a lot of medication, still going to doctors, still at that partial hospital, the Bridge Back to Life. And I remember sitting on Tommy's couch, and where it says, and I believe it's in Bill's story or somewhere close in the beginning, it says, quite as important would we see that spiritual principles would solve all our problems. And I remember saying to Tommy, I said, Tommy, you promised? Because there was so much on me. I'm identifying about alcoholism, but there's so much crazy. There's so much stuff. And I'm like, you promise? And he goes, I can't make you that promise, but this book does. And I held on to the first sense of hope. I started kind of feeling that no matter what, and I still got that brain. I still got that brain saying to myself, is this real? Are you really? One of the most honest things I ever said in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in the very beginning with Tommy at a place called Traditions House was, talking to him openly and honestly in the very beginning. He said, Steve, why don't you just say you have a desire to stop drinking? And it was probably the most honest thing I said at that time, and I'm glad I said it because I still didn't have a full picture of what it was that I had. And I said, my name is Steve, I have a desire to stop drinking. Because I couldn't yet. But only because of then sitting down with that man, turning the statements into questions, finding about the disease of alcoholism, did I say, my name's Steve, I'm an alcoholic. And I started to find that out. I started to look into that. I started to identify with the black words on the white pages. Not identifying what my mind told me it had to be, what it had to look like, how it had to show up. And that proceeded, and I'm so grateful for, to that foundation that man laid for me and with me has been the thing that I have always held on to. No matter what my recovery looked like, no matter what my sobriety has looked like, I have always held true and tried to that foundation of step one and powerlessness and unmanageability. I never had a problem believing in God, kind of like, I did have that problem believing in a God who could believe in me because of how I felt and thought about myself, But I had to come to believe in a power greater than myself that restored me to sanity when it came to the first drink. I was insane in other ways, and I'm still playing that out because I'm coming in that way. But the conversation started leading to the fact of this thing that I really have, that no one was going to tell me I have. Father Bob could have made that mention to me. Dr. Manny could have made that mention to me. That gentleman who said to me, you should have been in this program, made that mention to me. But until I started really looking at that openly and honestly with another man, I wasn't able to concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic. And once I made that concession, once I started on that process, and not leaving it there, going into that third step, having a willingness to believe in a power greater than myself, firing myself from upper management because of the way my life looked, And I never had that difficulty with a belief in God. I have, Catholic upbringing. And my mother was also a great example of a, Christian or whatever. It was a very organic, beautiful way. She had a hard life, in certain ways. And she always says that God was her best friend. I found these writings for her. So I held on to that in the beginning. Didn't make it complicated. Did make some of it grandiose in that first beginning of my conception of what God is. And then continuing on through that process and continuing on to uncover, discover, and discard, which probably a bunch of people have said on their recordings at the Conscious Contact group because we stole it from somebody else. But that's the truth. That's what started happening. Because I didn't just leave it by putting the drink down. I started to find out through AA and through sponsorship what this thing really looks like. And I went on that fearless, journey to do an inventory. And I went and I sat with that sponsor in step 5. And I remember sitting down in Tommy's basement and, there was trauma when I was younger. I was manipulated in a situation that, tarnished me in a lot of ways, that, abuse and everything like that. And I remember sitting with Tommy at that moment and he said, Stephen, you realize, and I could have went to therapy my whole life, but once I started doing some work in here, identifying the alcoholism, making that decision, looking at myself and looking how I showed up, and when that man said to me, Stephen, you realize how much power that has had over you? It was wiped away. Never thought about that situation ever again, to the degree of which it was and which it had a hold on me. And going out there and then doing step 6 and 7, which in the beginning was just a prayer, little list. Everything in my life today is 6 and 7. Every single thing in my life today is 6 and 7. Is the pendulum of which my alcoholism sways one way or the other, of where those things that I found in 4, shared in 5, and now still have today. I still have a host of character defects. I still have a host of empty wells that I can go to treat alcoholism stone cold sober. And I will get into that in a little bit of what my recovery has looked like, even with steps, even with sponsorship. Because sobriety and living a sober life is not easy. There are things that we are all going to come up against, that I had come up against, that if my connection to God isn't right, if I'm not doing certain things, I can make a lot of compromises to who and what I am as a man. regardless, and I could hide behind sponsorship because I'm not being honest with my sponsor, but I'm sponsoring people. I'm still, trying to be honest in certain ways, but I'm being delusional and dishonest and not accountable, transparent, and intimate to another man in my life. But I got a big book under my arm. I worked with a gentleman one time, and I remember sitting in his house, and we were sharing together, and I was sharing another fifth step with him, done multiple in recovery. I remember this gentleman taking his big book, and he put his hand on the top and on the bottom. He said, "Stephen, understand this now. People with this book could be just as harmful as people without it." And it's something that shook me, because I got a lot of spiritual pride, I got a lot of spiritual arrogance, I got a lot of things that if I'm armed with certain facts about myself, that could boomerang on at me too. And I could start thinking I got the answer, and you guys are wrong, and you guys are doing it this way, and you guys are doing it that way. And my big book could have diamond plating on and a couple of spikes if I'm not careful. And I started experiencing that in recovery. But at the same time, I am going out there and I'm making my amends, and I'm doing that, and I'm repairing the damage, I'm repairing all that stuff. I'm starting to develop really great relationships with my father. I'm starting to develop really great relationships with my family. And I was sitting with another gentleman today. A guy came to my house who I used to sponsor, and we're sitting in my garage, and he had just come back, and he was in his ninth step, and he wanted to make an amends to me. And we're sitting down together in the garage, and we're talking openly and honestly, and he's saying about a pedestal he thinks he put me on, and all this. And we're sitting there, and I lost my train of thought on this, so I don't know where I'm going. Oopsies, I'll be back. And so I bring up, this guy that I was sponsoring. He was talking about like the inconsistencies and this and that and whatever the case is. But we're having this open and honest conversation about walking shoulder to shoulder these days. And the relationships that I've gotten back from that process, and now being on the other side of it and having this conversation with the guy who's coming back, was just another part of my day that just really had my heart opened up. So my journey through recovery has been absolutely incredible and immense and hopeful, but not without struggle. And I always share this, and I share it out of honesty because of another gentleman who sponsored me about that challenge of saying, "Stephen, where else are you drinking in your life? Where are you taking non-ethyl alcohol into your system?" And my recovery, I mentioned about bulimia. So I'm stone cold sober, 310 pounds in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, sticking my fingers down my throat. Not talking to my sponsor about it. My aunt dies with $1.7 million, gives it to 20 some odd people in the family. I get myself out of debt and put myself even into more debt. I get into relationships that I shouldn't be in. I stay well past the expiration date. I become a shell of a man because I'm compromising who, what, and what I am. And thank God, though, at that moment, I am still tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous. I am still sponsoring. I am still having commitments. But I'm living dishonestly in my heart and in my mind and in my soul. I get out of that relationship. I stay single for an entire year. I get involved in general service in Staten Island. I start falling in love with Alcoholics Anonymous again. And not that I ever didn't, but in a different way. And I start getting involved with service and 12-step work and the general service body. I start learning AA history, and I start getting engaged after getting out of this relationship. Because I do everything for the effect. I drank for the effect. I spend for the effect. I spend money I don't have to impress people I don't even like. I eat for the effect, and I end up 310 pounds, fully bulimic in the rooms of AA. I get into relationships for the effect, because as my wife always says to me, you didn't take hostages, you were taken hostage because of the way you are. And I end up fat, in debt, and with a hostage, stone cold sober, because I'm doing everything for the effect, because I have alcoholism. I can seek that in anything. I can seek it in money. I can seek it in food. I can seek it in love. I can seek it in relationships. And those are the experiences I had to have as a sober man to take me to the place of which I am now. And later on moving into now, this is like 2015, 2016, I end up going back to school. I was working for AT&T. So I was working at health food stores, working in Trader Joe's. I had, I was really heavily involved and kind of maybe even hiding in AA a little bit, like being Mr. AA, doing this, doing that, and stuff. And then I ended up going back to school, and I had a lot of credits. I ended up applying and going to nursing school. And I ended up going back to school. I go to a school called Trinitas, and even at that time, I'm an alternate DCMC. I'm doing different things in AA. I'm staying tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous in a different way because of the brokenness I'd experienced stone cold sober. And I start, moving in a different direction, per se. So I go back to school. I actually have to leave nursing school because I'm in another relationship that was better, but I stayed past the expiration one in that one too. Not perfect. And then I end up having to get a double hip replacement. So I end up having to leave nursing school. I get a double hip replacement. And at that time, I was actually involved in general service too. And that's when I was an alternate DCMC and a DCMC. So I'm staying tethered in that way. I'm still going to school. I'm still doing this. And it's different. I had changed sponsors. That's when I was sponsored by this man challenging me in a different way of looking at alcoholism. And I end up, finishing school. I end up, graduating with an RN. I end up, then my first job was at a hospital in Jersey called Clara Moss. I got hired for a med-surg oncology hospice floor. And I end up going into that day for my first day of work, and I go in to go to the bathroom. And I go in to take a pee-pee, and right on the wall is the Serenity Prayer. And it was one of those winks from God. You're right where I want you to be, kid. I stayed in that job for 2.5 years. I was out of a relationship for about 3.5 to 4 years. And I needed to be that. I needed to do that. I needed to concentrate on school. I concentrated on recovery. I was sponsoring. I was honest about everything that was going on. Every wart, every wound, everything. And then from there, I end up meeting a beautiful girl. I watched her from a distance. Kept my eye on her. She was a member of my home group. And I just kept an eye on her. We joke around, we were sniffing each other's butts for about a year. And I didn't, because I'm also making sure she's not crazy, but I'm also making sure of where I am as a man after the work that I had done. And I said before about that foundation. So, I know I've always had a strong foundation in 1, 2, and 3, but I've never left it there either. When anything has ever come up, there's always been a fourth, there's always been a fifth, there's always been a reconciliation of the things and the harms that I have caused. I've never left my steps, my recovery in that 1, 2, 3 dance. And I'm so grateful for that foundation that was laid. I never just left it there. So after that time of not being, being single, and I met Anna, and we started dating, and we ended up, getting engaged about 1.5 years after that, 2 years. We ended up getting married up in Woodstock, New York. Had an incredible, weekend wedding with people outside of Woodstock. We had the whole resort to ourselves and everybody. 60% were recovery, maybe even more than that. In the wedding. My wedding party consisted of my brother, my father, my nephews, and my 2 sponsors. Because I couldn't picture my life the way it unfolded and the things that I have today without that man, Tommy, and my current sponsor, Jimmy. I had to have them up there. Because I know that and I don't say this in a prideful way, I came a long way from that knock and saying, I refuse medical attention. And Anna and I, we're married. We have a beautiful daughter. Her name, I always got to bring it up. Her name is Carolina Hope. And the reason her middle name is Hope, it is because the one thing that neither her mother nor I had when we got here, but it is the one thing, no matter what it has looked like, that I have never lost. I have never lost hope since coming into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. No matter how it's looked, no matter if I've been, a good aim, none of that, mumbo jumbo stuff. I've never lost hope since being here. And now I work at Staten Island University Hospital, across from 450 Seaview, across from where I was at a cancer center. And I'm an ambulatory oncology nurse. And my mother passed away September 3rd, 2002 at 8:34 at night from malignant melanoma. And just like the idea that maybe, we could all have is like, oh, the worst thing is that I'm an alcoholic, or this and that. The best thing in my life is that I'm an alcoholic. Because I've now been able to find a solution to all of my problems, just like what Tommy said to me, that spiritual principles will solve all of my problems. And I get to have the life that God intends for me to be. Because I came in here and I decided to just lay aside what I thought this looked like and trust another man and trust this process. And the reason I bring my mother up too is because I believe in providence more than I do consequence, in the fact that, or coincidence rather, that now, because of the pain that I experienced from mother dying at 57 years old from cancer and being on hospice, do I get to be there for cancer patients? Do I get to have that thing spin? And now that, which is horrible. My mom was my biggest fan, my greatest enabler in ways, but now because of that, I get to kind of offer something different and have conversations with patients in a completely different way. Similar to being an alcoholic and having a conversation and a connection that no one else can have. So through that shared pain as an alcoholic, we get to identify with that pain inside of us. And through being, having that experience with my mother, I get to connect with patients in a different way. It's the same thing, and I don't believe there's any mistakes. There's hardships, this thing's gonna happen. January, I'm going for a massive back surgery. They're going in the front and in the back. I'm nervous, yes. I'd be, not a saint, There's stuff that's been going on, and there's fears that come up. But what I'm also grateful for is that the way I've been shown in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've never deferred from too far, especially since that time in that, that middle area that I was telling you about. I send my inventory to my sponsor 5 out of 7, if not 7 out of 7, with 16 other guys, all the guys that he sponsors. I stay accountable and transparent to another man no matter what it looks like. My wife and I share our recovery together, but separately. She has her meeting, I have mine, and I'm grateful she found a woman's meeting. She's like jazzed up to go to it. I'm so happy, But I try to live as much of a transparent life as I can, and that part of that inventory and that accountability is huge. To be transparent to another man and another people, and I try to do that with the guys I get. I try not to, it is shoulder to shoulder. It is about sharing my warts and my wounds as well. And when I say that, and I may not think it or believe it, and 100% all the time, but I do know when I get quiet that my life today and everything that I have is only possible because of God's grace and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
Okay, incredible stuff. First and foremost, I want to thank Steve for coming out here tonight, doing an incredible job of delivering a message of hope and recovery to our group here. A couple quick announcements and we'll wrap up the meeting. As was mentioned, the food in the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock every week, so feel free to show up early, hang out with us. If you do want to get involved in service with this group, even better. If you want to help out with a little bit of service after the meeting, we could always use help putting the chairs away. There is oh, it's not back there, there's a diagram, but we pull those chairs out. Somebody will help you out. But I wanted to thank everybody for helping out with the meeting tonight. Thanks to our greeters, our readers. Most importantly, just thank our speaker, Steve. It's customary for us to form a line in the front here and thank our speakers personally. We usually shake hands and thank our speakers personally, but let's give one more round of applause to our speakers. And if you do care to join us, we have a beautiful way of closing. We're going to circle up and close with our Lord's Prayer. close down the meeting as always with a brief moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic inside and outside of these rooms, followed by our Lord's Prayer. Our Father,